And welcome to AXSChat. I've been away for a few weeks. It looks like I've been abandoned on a desert island. Actually, I've just been moving house in the middle of a lockdown. But I've got the old quarantine beard going. So welcome back to AXSChat, one of our regular contributors, Nabil Eid. Nabil is has been one of our guests before, several years ago. He's based in Syria. He runs Telecenter, has written a number of books around accessibility, and of course is a regular contributor to the chat as well. So Nabil, great to have you back. Great to see you, and welcome. Can you remind our audience a little bit about the work that you're doing, please?
Thank you for having me on AXSChat. So a little about my background. I would consider my profession to be an advocate for the community of disabilities. I have 23 years of experience in disabilities, including strategy. My beginning was in 1993 when I founded the first computer for ICT accessibility in Syria. I remember at that time, parents of students with hearing disability asked me about the possibility of training their children on IT and some application programs. So that was my first chance to meet, and it was the first initiative at the national level. I created the first approach to teach students with hearing disabilities to develop a new sign language for computer team. In 2004, I worked with UNDP in Syria. We have worked to establish, I think, 57 new ICT access points in marginalized rural area, including established 4 ICT accessibility to providing assistive technology and some programs to people with disability. I think in the same time, I conducted the first project in Syria in coordinate with the UNDP Egypt through program ICT in the Arab region for blind. During that period, I trained a lot of students in using screen readers program and assistive technology to enhance their education and employment. Then I participate in presenting results through WISIS in Tunisia 2005. It was the first Arab initiative on information to lead that to establish 4 ICT accessibility centers for the blind in 4 different regions of Syrian geography. Also working in cooperation with Syrian government through Ministry of Social Affairs and with support of local community to establish the first ICT accessibility under title Study Centers for Persons with Disability Research. Working in programming, develop the first program for intellectual disability, serve Down syndrome, autism, and learning disability. So that the program applied in Syria and Lebanon, Sultanate Oman, etc. Also, in addition, I worked closely with the Syrian local community to build capacity and ICT empowerment of women with disability and launched the first digital literacy campaign for girls with disability in coordinate with the ITU organization. Worked with the UNESCO and that security for knowledge network of disadvantaged community and at building ICT center by transforming select ICT access point into knowledge. In 2010, I moved to work with Telecenter Foundation, develop some program for marginalized people and serve vulnerable group by using ICT for development. Working also with GIZ in Iraq, GIZ Germany, Society for International Cooperation, conduct research and access education to vocational education and training and income generation internally displaced person with refugee and history in Kurdistan. We investigate through our work to focus on refugees with disabilities. Really, the refugees with disabilities the vulnerable groups in displaces and in host communities and refugees camp. There are a lack of all facilitated to support them from accessibility, from learning, lack of learning, lack of support, their education, lack of employment. Most refugees just staying at their camp and awaiting some aid from organizations.
Can I ask a question about the refugee situation? Because I'm sure it's changed over a number of years, where previously, whilst the physical conditions may not have improved a great deal, people now have access to mobile phones. So have you seen the proliferation of mobile phones and the access to technology through mobile making a difference for refugees with disabilities in the camps? Has that had an impact in any kind of positive way that you might not have seen 10 years ago?
We conduct with some organizations to support and to get funds for support refugees with disabilities from other organizations, but really most of them not deal in that. I hope in the next steps or when we planning for other issue, go with other organization to get fund and support the refugees with disabilities. And there are a lot of refugees with disabilities here inside Syria or in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey, in Iraq, and other. I think there is 2 million or more refugees with disability spread in this region. Okay.
Debra, you had a question?
Yeah,
I did. I'll go off mute. Nabil, I continue to be so impressed with your background. It's amazing what you've done in your history, and sometimes in really difficult situations with, limited to no Wi-Fi, to everything that was happening in Syria, and you didn't let it stop you. You just kept going and going and going. But I also want to talk just for a second about the refugees, because I know that I have, studied a lot, been watching a lot about the refugees. And I was surprised when I saw a show on 60 Minutes here in the United States that the average person in a refugee camp now, the average time is 20 years. And I think a lot of people, we don't think about it like that. We think, oh, you're a refugee, you're going to be in a camp for, a few months, a few years would be ridiculous, but 20 years. So the world has just started realizing that we've got to get education. We've got to get technology. We've got to get communications to the refugees, or, how can people get out of this situation? So I was just surprised at the length of time that a refugee spends in a refugee camp. And so how, I know that we're getting education to them and we're starting to get technology. And as Neil noted, that we're seeing at the, I remember hearing that the United Nations, Red Cross, things like that, when they go into refugees camps or they go into places where people are being displaced and, going to go to the refugee camp, they ask them what they need. In the past, they would say, we need water, we need clean water, we need clothes, we need food. And now when they ask that question, the number one thing they ask for is good Wi-Fi, because they know that if I have my phone, my smartphone, no matter what model it is, I have good Wi-Fi, I can work myself out of this situation maybe a lot better than waiting for a government to respond. So that's relatively new. And I was wondering if you wanted to comment on that at all. Just the length that people are staying in, and how do we get them the education they need? How do we make sure people with disabilities are being accommodated, because we know a lot of refugees are people with disabilities because they've gone through a traumatic situation. So many of them are going to have post-traumatic stress disorder. Many of them are going to have, lost limbs and all kinds of different, situations.
Yes, it's so the difficult situation for refugees with disabilities, but we can suggest some, when I worked with in Iraq, suggest to build telecenters for support person with disabilities. Building telecenters in refugees camp and in the host community, maybe collect all students with refugees to learn there, to get for provide them job opportunities. There are a lot of programs that accessible, and most of the programs that support refugees to get education, to independent, to integrated, to reading digital content. I think telecenter for disabilities is so important in refugees camp and the host community.
Nabil, if you look to the current situation of people with disabilities living in those camps, what are the main needs that people have there? Are they related with physical support? Are they related with trying to find ways for them to connect and develop knowledge? What are the main needs that people have?
For this group, I think they need physical and support. Physical by building such as telework or telecenters to support them. Also, they need to training staff, a lot of staff for and conduct some program for them. Not for refugees with disabilities, there are kind of type of disabilities. So we need to tailor each program for them. For example, person with hearing disabilities, they can learn a lot from programs such as Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and others. For example, for other blind, they can using OCR. So we can need to put them in the main of target to support and health. Yeah.
In continue on that, what type of programs do you know that the UN is implementing in those camps?
Sorry?
What type of programs are you aware that are being implemented by the United Nations in those camps?
About the programs?
Yes, from the United Nations. What type of support are they providing to refugees in the camps?
Yeah. Now, I think for United Nations, they have such as WHO and UNICEF working for support children with disabilities in refugee camps. They set some strategy issue. And now working to inclusive education for them in refugees camp. Maybe that in the next step, I think UNICEF just set some program to support also digital reading for them. So when we talk about support digital content or digital reading for refugees and other persons with disabilities, so important to provide them with to benefit all them refugees in host communities or in or the displaced person in some area. My first, my book, when I wrote about the importance of digital content, why I wrote the accessible library for support disabilities. I think it is important to increase the important of support digital reading and persons with disability in their ability to obtain first-hand information from their social support network. We need to bridge digital divide that prevent all persons with disability, including refugees with disability, from full inclusion in our knowledge-based society. But we should believe that in integration and equal opportunity and committed to meeting the needs of persons with disability in a timely manner through removing and preventing barriers to accessibility and meeting requirement and standard for an accessible such as library and other issues.
Nabil, I often wonder, in these type of crisis situations, even though they're going so long, that means once an average stay is 20 years, how much do the refugees, and I know this is a hard question, and I also understand it depends on where we're talking about, because we have refugees all over the world. It's just not about Syria. But, how do we make sure that the refugees with disabilities, visible and invisible, because we know about 80% of disabilities are invisible, how do we make sure that they know that they should be asking for accommodations, and even if it's invisible, that they have they have rights? But in a crisis situation where everybody's in trouble, how do we get, the agencies and the people that are coming to help to understand the complexities of the needs? And I think it ties directly into the same thing of something that I know you've championed and we've all benefited from. You took my book, for example, and translated into Arabic, and you've done that for others, and you've written so much, and you've supported United Nations and all these agencies and countries all over the world. But at the same time, how important it is for us to get them the data, the education, the awareness in their native languages, and at the same time, be teaching them other languages if they need it, to try to help them, get out of these situations, because there's probably not as many opportunities for them if they're speaking certain languages as maybe other languages. So I was just wondering about some of these complex nuances and if they're being addressed.
Yeah, that's the good question. But I think in refugee camp and host communities, we need to planning and designing library at the same centers for them to make, and we need to make library accessible. You asked me about there is a economic research for building library accessible. But I think many improvement, however, can be implemented with a very small amount of money, or possibly without any cost. The solution can often be found through the change of staff attitude and thinking in a new way. We can training staff and some volunteers. We can help refugees them and to building a library and provide them with appropriate information for them. Also, I think important support inclusive education for them. When the organizer should also provide information on the accessibility. Some facilities we can adapt it, such as in trades and general area in building, but I think we can do more if joint effort to make such as a small center or small schools for provide the necessary information and support them by education and employment.
So Nabil, you were talking about libraries, and we're talking about digitized libraries here, and you're talking about making stuff accessible, and you mentioned that this is low to no cost. Now, everything has some level of cost, even if it's the effort that is involved here. So what are we talking here? We're talking about sort of enabling people to create their own libraries through giving them a scanner, an OCR software. Are we teaching the teachers in the camps to be able to understand what it is that they need to do to create documents accessible? Because then I can see that they're going to be creating documents anyway, so it's no additional cost. Is that really what you're talking about here?
Yes, when I focused about building library or education centers in refugees camp, but when we talking about a school library or a public library, university library, we need more resources to provide with access surface material. The program should be also available in alternative, for example, ebook, audiobook, large print, braille, etc. When I meant about the support for building and planning library, all effort should be work for the staff and librarians and organizers, volunteer, advocate, and other. That's very, very important. That's very important. But the main question is how to raise awareness of library. How to raise awareness of library. How can raise and increase community to support public library for persons with disabilities? That's very important question. Are we prepared accessible website for library? I think now 7% of published work accessible in the world. But what the role of publishers? What the role of community? What the role of organization in support the Marrakesh Treaty to end that focus about the book is in the feminine. That key question about support education at that library.
So Nabil, you mentioned a role that publishers should be playing. But at the same time, what can other corporations do to help? And are there some corporations that are helping that you see are really stepping up? And at the same time, and I know these are hard questions, but I wonder what the world can learn from what people are dealing with in these refugee camps and apply that knowledge to what we're dealing with all over the world with the COVID virus. And if there's just some, if there's some wisdom that we can learn as a world from these two parallel situations. So I'm just curious if, what more corporations can do, because I have multiple corporations coming to us asking us how they can help during the COVID virus and really wanting to do the right thing. We're seeing some really amazing things happening from our corporations, but how can we tie some of these efforts to the refugees and back and forth, learning from the refugees? And are there any publishers that are really stepping up? I see publishers doing a lot of really, really important things with accessibility. So I was just wondering if you're seeing that as well from your lens.
Yeah. I think we can, the International Federation of Library Association has maybe a part of its mission statement to empower and promote society by driving access to information, knowledge, and culture for all, to support development, learning, creativity, and innovation. When an inclusive society aims to full participation for all its members, it's imperative to deal with social barriers for participation in order to include people with disability. A broad, holistic approach required. We need also more collaboration, more corporate with Federation of Library and organizations and UN most organizations working in from UN to support digital reading and to all persons with disabilities, and especially we need special awards to refugees with disabilities and training students to get more information. I think they have the right to read because access to information is to human right closely connected to reading. Reading is a socio-economic necessity in a society where writing language is deeply integrated in the culture. Being able to read is not just on intellectual skills. To read and increase the risk of social exclusion with all its negative effect. Yeah.
I absolutely 100% agree with you. It's more than just a nice to have. It's absolutely a right to be able to have access to information, to be able to understand what's going on in times like these when we face challenges with health and we have this lockdown. That ability to access information is of paramount importance, and therefore accessibility of the information for everyone is hugely important. And we want to make sure that all of our communities are armed with the knowledge to keep themselves safe and healthy. Nabil, it's been a real pleasure again to have you on the show. I need to thank our supporters, the companies that support us, the organizations. So Barclays Access, Microlink PC and MyClearText for all of their good work keeping our lights on and keeping us accessible. And want to wish everyone out there a happy Easter, happy Passover, happy holidays in general, even if you are all staying at home. I hope that you have the opportunity to spend some quality time with your families, whether they're with you in person and close up and personal, or through video links like this. So thank you very much, Nabil. It's been a real pleasure again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil.
Bye-bye.
Everyone be safe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You too. Bye. Bye-bye.